Welcome, everyone. My name is Sean O'Loughlin, Principal Pops Conductor of Symphoria. And today I'm actually taking on a different role. I've been fortunate enough to be able to come and conduct the Casual One concert. And here to talk about that with us is the venerable Peter Rabinowitz, who is our program notes annotator, one member of our board, and just an all-around really cool guy, a professor at Hamilton as well. So welcome, Peter.
Actually, retired former professor at Hamilton, but that's
okay. Well, you know,
even better.
We all did something in life, so there.
So it's great to be here.
Well, and for me, it's a particular honor, Peter, because my concerts don't normally get the Peter Rabinowitz treatment. So it's
right,
lovely. It's lovely to be able to talk music with you and talk this wonderful program that we're going to look forward to this afternoon. And it's been just a real treat for me to dive into more classical literature, which I don't always get the opportunity to do. And due to some kind of last minute health protocols from the state of New York, we've had to switch up the program just a little bit. So unfortunately, the Schubert Unfinished Symphony will remain, in fact, that unfinished. And we've shifted now to a wonderful work by Gustav Holst called the St. Paul's Suite. This will feature our string section of Symphoria. And Peter, we had, it was part of our discussion last week of how to kind of pivot at such a last minute, and your wonderful selection of this piece and recommendation of this piece has been really a joy to get to learn and kind of, you know, last minute fire drill, kind of put it on the program. But, you know, with the pros that we have here with Symphoria, it's just going to be a real treat this afternoon to hear the piece. So tell me what about the piece really caught your eye or caught your ear, so to say?
Well, actually, it's how we got there. We needed a small piece. We were looking mostly at classical and Baroque things to throw in there, and I felt, you know, let's do something a little bit different. And actually, it was my wife Nancy who turned me toward British string music, 20th century British string music. She said Elgar, and I said, oh, how about the whole suite? And then I realized it was like absolutely perfect. And perfect for a lot of reasons, one of which, of course, is that you are known for your work in film music. Holst, as a composer, although not this particular piece, was tremendously influential. You cannot even begin to imagine Star Wars existing without Holst's The Planets, right?
Of course, and The Planets was temporary music that Lucas had put in there to show John Williams what he wanted.
Is that really true? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And you know, there's a lot of kind of crossovers with Holst as well. I mean, he's most known for The Planets, of course, but his chamber works and specifically his works for wind band around the turn of the 20th century are really quite remarkable. And in fact, there's a movement of this, the finale movement, which was taken from Holst's second suite in F for military band. And he took that, it's two wonderful folk songs, the Darga song and of course Greensleeves. And maybe it's a little of us getting anxious to hear Christmas music, but you'll hear that kind of woven in. And it brings me to one of the things about this piece that I really like is Holst has this penchant for creating two different themes. And then so you hear each of the theme in their own glory, so to say. And then he finds this wonderful compositional way to weave them together so they become counterpoint in and of themselves. He does it several times throughout the four movements of this work. And maybe something to ruse about there.
Yeah, and I was thinking given the sort of last minute thing, I was sort of going back to this piece, which I hadn't really worked on for a while, and thinking about it. And I was sort of wondering about that last movement. It's called Fantasy on the Dargason, and that's supposedly the main tune. And yet it seems to me by the time we get to the end, that music has been almost reduced to the accompaniment of what is, quote, the real music, which is Greensleeves. And when that comes in, it's sort of hinted at a little bit first. You know something's happening, and then all of a sudden, Greensleeves is such a glorious moment.
And one thing to look for too, just in looking at me conduct it, and I know every conductor pretty much does this because it's in the score, but he starts out, so it's in two. It's in a really direct 6/8 2 duple meter feel. But when he goes into Greensleeves, he calls on the conductor to go into one. So dee da da dee da 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 da. So it's the same tempo, it's the same meter, or it's the same tempo, I should say, but the meter changes, and the feel also changes as well. And he does that too in the second movement, the ostinato movement, which was probably going to be the most challenging one for the orchestra and I to tackle because of the repetition of it. The second violins, boy, they are going to be, their fingers are going to be burning holes in it by the end of it. But it's again his dichotomy of the 2 verse 3. And what your ear is hearing is not necessarily what we see on the page as musicians, which to me is a wonderful life and a wonderful kind of come off the page feel that Holst really, really accomplishes so well in this.
Yeah, no, that second movement, that ostinato, and of course, the last movement is an ostinato too. That is the repetition of the same theme over and over and over again. And you would think, as you do in the first movement of the planets, Mars, you say to yourself, how long can he go on this without boring us? And yet he has this way of doing it and playing with it and moving things around that just keeps you endlessly fascinated, even though the music is really obstinate, as ostinato means.
Well, and he writes across the bar line, meaning that what the meter is doesn't necessarily what you're hearing. And, you know, for example, the opening of the ostinato, it sounds like it's in a big 3, but it's actually in 1. You know, and then he just kind of writes across the measure. So again, it creates such a life. And as a composer myself, it's one of the techniques I love employing because it just, it feels like the music is more than what's written, if that makes sense in kind of more layman's terms. And the third movement is a wonderful opportunity to feature Peter Rovit, our concertmaster, beautiful solo violin line, and also a bit of a tale of 2 cities, so to say, in the slow kind of 3, and there's dichotomies within the dichotomy because it's a slow piece, but it's pizzicato with a lyrical melodic playing in the solo violin, and then it goes almost without warning into a fast vivace 2/4, and then you're like, whoa, what just happened? So it's a wonderful kind of real test of character for the orchestra to be able to play in 2 different styles in one, you know, 2-minute movement of work.
You know, you talk about that 2-minute movement. I think one of the things that's really striking, you think of the planets, this is a vast piece. Yeah, I love every minute of it, but it does go on. It's 15 minutes long. And we've been talking about this, the St. Paul suite now for about 6 minutes. We haven't even begun to talk about what's in there. And if we were playing it, it would have been almost over by now. He gets so much crammed into such a little bit of space. It's really, really remarkable, and it shows a very different side of his genius, I think.
Well, and it's going to really show the artistry of the Symphoria strings and all the musicians in the orchestra to be able to pivot with this kind of short amount of time and present
absolutely
a tremendous, looking forward to a tremendous performance. And then Peter, looking forward to the second half, we have a wonderful opportunity to feature 3 of the most talented and accomplished musicians in our Symphoria family. Sonia Williams, Heidi Hoffman, and pianist Rob Aller will be playing the Beethoven Triple Concerto. So thoughts on that piece for our listeners?
Well, actually, one of the things that's wonderful, I know as we were chatting actually before this chat, because we did do that, you know, you talked about it as an iconic piece. And of course it is, but it's also actually the least familiar of Beethoven's concertos. And you don't get a chance to hear it very often. I'm particularly pleased to be doing it because it shows off the strength we have in our institution, but also because actually I've never heard a live performance of it in my life before.
Well, it makes 2 of us, Peter.
Yeah, right. And it's such a wonderful piece, and it does such a different way of thinking about the concerto than his other pieces, because you get the conversation within the trio and the conversation between the trio and the rest of the orchestra. It's also a remarkably sunny piece, given that Beethoven...
The melodies are wonderful. That first and third movement melodies are just tuneful, you know.
Right. And of course, he had just found out that he was deaf. He was more or less the same time he wrote the Eroica Symphony, and yet Beethoven was able to sort of remove himself from that anguish and turn out this really, really delightfully sunny, wonderful piece.
Well, and we're certainly looking forward to chatting with the trio, the soloists here in a little bit, but it's certainly a nice little morsel of info to kind of, you know, whet the appetite of our listeners. So Peter, as always, such a pleasure. And again, it's a great, it's just fun to chat music with you. You know, you're so knowledgeable, and and I'll make you review and write program notes for Sleigh Ride one of these days. And I know it's going to be fantastic.
I'm looking forward to that. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you, Peter. We'll see you soon.